Phil, thank you. It is the battle Illinois lawmakers and unions knew was coming and had been preparing for years. Now that pension reform is law, the constitutionality will be challenged in and determined by the courts. The Illinois Constitution lays out the pension provisions succinctly. Quote, membership in any pension or retirement system of the state, any unit of local government or school district, or any agency or instrumentality thereof shall be an enforceable contractual relationship, the benefits of which shall not be diminished or impaired. Employee unions argue the language is utterly clear and that any changes to their pensions is a violation of their contracts. But is it? And what exactly was intended with that language in the Illinois Constitution rewrite of 1970? Here with some answers about all of that are Mark Rosen. He is a constitutional law professor at IIT Chicago-Kent College of Law. Professor Rosen testified before lawmakers about the pension reform bill. Ann Lucene is a constitutional law professor at the John Marshall Law School, holding the Edward T. and Noble W. Lee Chair. And she was also a research assistant for the ConCon of 1970. And Malcolm Kamen is an attorney and a delegate of Illinois' 6th Constitutional Convention of 1970. So welcome all of you to Chicago tonight. Let's just start with that graph in the Constitution and talk to each of you, starting with you, Mr. Rosen. Where's the ambiguity in that clause of the Illinois Constitution?
There is no actual ambiguity in the clause of the Constitution, but the thing is that much of the time absolute constitutional language is not given absolute effect by courts. That's true of our most sacred constitutional guarantees, for example, with regard to speech. It's true with regard to the model for the Illinois Constitution, which is the contract clause. And the United States Supreme Court, as well as the Illinois Supreme Court, have said that the contract clause and the pension clause do not provide absolute guarantees. So it's basically from the case law rather than from the text of the Constitution itself.
It's all right. So now we fast forward to 2013, and employees and retirees who have been state workers and have believed that this was an immutable piece of contract law for them, say a deal is a deal. You testified in behalf of the argument that that what was passed was constitutional, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Why do you think it is?
I think it is because when constitutional language is put in place, what constitutional language does is it identifies an array of very strong commitments that the constitutional drafters and the people who adopt the Constitution embrace, like protection for pensions, like what the Illinois Constitution does as well, commitments to education. And it's impossible to realize completely commitments to all. There can be conflicts that arise in the future.
And those unions are going to say, boo-hoo.
Well, but the fact of the matter is that the constitutional protections provide a tremendous amount, just not absolute protection. The fact is that absent constitutional protection, then pension benefits would have been always on the table, a matter for the stuff of ordinary politics. The point is that constitutional protections take ordinary politics out of it, but when there are particularly strong, pressing public needs, then there can be reasonable accommodations that can be made. That's the language of the United States Constitution.
Professor Lucene, do you agree with that?
The preamble to this statute is absolutely amazing. I worked for the legislature. I occasionally wrote a preamble. I don't think I could have written this one, which just simply says the state is in dire financial straits, so we're going to cut back on the pensions. There's nothing there about we want to reform the pension system so that it's modern, so that it's fairer, times change. It's we are in bad shape, and I love the phrase, we've done everything else that we could, because I don't think they have done everything else that they could.
Well, don't look only at the preliminary part of the bill. The fact of the matter is that the old form of pension did not provide a right for people to ensure that the legislature actually gave the money that they were supposed to give. Now they have that here.
What happens, its implementation is July 2014.
Correct.
What happens if this court battle carries beyond that? Do they implement and then pull back if it's judged unconstitutional?
They could do that. There could also be a move to stay the bill, the law pending the court outcome.
To something you said, Professor Lucine, and I'm interested in your companion's view of this. Because of the separation of powers, the courts can't say, well, go raise taxes or find some revenue. On the other hand, can't they say you haven't exhausted all of your remedies and hence this is still a contract, go figure it out?
Yes, potentially they could. I mean, what the court does is the court will look to the legislation and ask, is this reasonable? And I would think part of the is this reasonable analysis would consider, well, were there alternatives that were possible? It seems to me, on the facts, there were not alternatives in the sense this was not a problem that could be resolved simply by raising taxes or cutting governmental services. But yes, that is a question that a court naturally would ask.
Couldn't a court say, you have a mechanism to change the Constitution if you want to change the Constitution, so go ahead and do that?
The court is part of the mechanism of implementing the Constitution, and the court itself. Again, I want to reiterate. No, I'd like to reiterate that the court itself, the Illinois Supreme Court, has said that the pension clause and the contract clause does not immunize contractual obligations from every conceivable kind of impairment, okay? They're part of the system, courts are, of implementing and giving life to the Constitution.
So, predictions? Is it going to be constitutional, unconstitutional?
Part and part.
Yeah,
Part and part?
I would say much the same thing, but I think what people are going to find out, Bernie Weisberg, who voted against this, said this is creating the illusion of protection rather than the reality of protection.
Quick. Answer your question, yes.
Yes. All right. Thank you very much. Mark Rosen, Ann Lucine, Malcolm Kamen, thank you very much for being with us on Chicago Tonight.